We are privileged today to be able to hear from Eva Schneider. Eva is a Holocaust survivor who endured 2 camps, including Auschwitz. And it's been said by an author that there is nothing that can replace the stories of survivors in Holocaust education. In fact, I was out in the lobby and had a young man come and talk to me, and he said he had not ever heard from a survivor, and it just touched him to his soul. Well, that's true of all of us. And so today, Eva will be speaking as an eyewitness with her testimony, and it's really timely because tomorrow, May 5th, but on 2025, it marks the 80th anniversary of her liberation from the Mauthausen camp. The 80th year. She's a very young lady, and we get the opportunity to hear Eva Schneider today. Please welcome her.
I also am short. It's my great pleasure to be here and to share with you on the 80th anniversary of my liberation, which was May the 5th. I will not talk about the Holocaust in general. Instead, I would like to share my own personal experiences with you. The Holocaust started for me when I was 8 years old, when my mother had to pin a yellow Star of David on my clothing when I left the house. That was the beginning. When I was 9 years old, some uniformed police came to our door and told my parents that they had to leave their home within 24 hours. They couldn't take anything with them, no furniture, no paintings, no mementos, only what they could pack in a suitcase. So with 3 suitcases, we left our home the next day. I don't know how my father did it, but he found us a room in a Christian lady's house. From then, for the following 2 years, my parents and I shared one room wherever we were and had no possessions. We lived about 1 year with false documents that my father was able to buy, and we lived as Christians. I could not go to school because my parents were afraid that at age 9 and age 10, I might give us away. While we were living as Christians, my father was arrested. He was in the street and somebody pointed him out to a policeman and said, "There goes a Jew," and my father was arrested. At that point, my mother felt that we must go into hiding. And in my hometown, a little town called Nitra in Slovakia, a Christian friend of the family ran a brewery. He was the manager of that brewery, and he agreed to hide us in the attic of the brewery. We were there for 6 weeks under very difficult conditions. The attic was just one very large area with sawdust on the floor. There were 2 stools, as I recall, no bathroom facilities, no cooking facilities. We ate whatever we got from him that came in a box or in a can. We slept on blankets on the floor, and we used the far end of the attic as a bathroom. And we'd go to the bathroom and cover it up with sawdust and then go back to the area we lived in. Once a week, he would come and get us during the night, and we would go down to his house, which was on the premises, and we would take a shower, and we would get a warm meal. On one of those visits, the police came to the door and arrested us. Having remembered that as a Christian little girl, I didn't really need to be afraid while we were living as Christians, I pleaded with the policeman and I said, I am not Jewish, I'm Christian, please don't arrest us. And at that point, that policeman said something very prophetic. He said, little girl, if you're Christian, you will be released very quickly. But if you're Jewish, you will have to bear the consequences. Within a couple of weeks of being arrested, we were loaded onto the infamous cattle cars, and we were on our way to Auschwitz. We got to Auschwitz on November 3rd, 1945. And I'm a great believer in miracles. And there were 3 miracles that I am sure saved my life and allowed me to come home. The first miracle occurred in Auschwitz, where my mother, on the way, prepared me for death. She told me, because most of the Jewish people knew what was going on, that's why we were all in hiding. She told me we would go into a large room and gas would come out, and it probably won't hurt, we'll just go to sleep. We got to Auschwitz on November 3rd. Unbeknownst to us, in early October, some members of the Sonderkommando. Sonderkommando were a group of Jewish prisoners, young prisoners, who had the terrible, terrible job of collecting the bodies from the gas chamber and putting them in the ovens. One group of Sonderkommando got a hold of explosives, and they partially blew up one of the crematoria. This event caused them to stop gassing in the gas chamber or the crematorium that we were taken to. We got to this large room. We had to take off all our clothes, all the jewelry, drop everything on the floor. But as we were walking towards 2 very, very large doors, our heads were shaven, and my mother whispered to me, she said, why would they shave our heads if we're going to die? And a bit further down, they tattooed our arms. I was number A27078 on the inside of my arm. At that point, my mother said to me, I think we're going to live. They would not give us a number if they were going to kill us now. And that was my first miracle. We beat the gas chambers by 2 days. We were in Auschwitz, my mother and I, for about a month. Every morning we got up, we had to go outside, snow, rain, whenever, we had to go outside, and we were counted. And about a month after we got there, we were counted, and they called out a number of names among them my mother, and she was taken away. Here I was, 11 years old, alone, under very, very difficult circumstances. I don't have to describe to you all that I experienced, all the atrocities that I saw. You can look it up in books that have been written about that. In January, I worked, by the way, every morning. We were counted, then we got our soup. We got soup twice a day, and you were lucky if there was a potato in your particular bowl. And then we went to work, and in the evening we got the soup, and then we went to sleep. By the way, I slept 6 to a cot, no mattress, on wood. In January of 1945, I heard the women talking that the Russian army is coming close, and perhaps, Auschwitz would be liberated. Well, that was not to be for me. Before the Russians could get to Auschwitz, all of us, thousands of us, men and women, prisoners, were lined up, and we were walked towards Germany. In the history books, this is described as the Death March. It was called that because so many of the participants died. You just dropped, and we were all skin and bones. We were weak, and yet we had to keep on going, and we slept there where we stopped when they told us to stop, on the ground. And a miracle happened on that march. On the 5th day, when I really was at the end of my strength, and the only thing that kept me going is that before my mother was taken away from me, she said, unless they shoot her or hang her, she's gonna make it. And I felt I owed her the same. So I am walking on day 5, very tired, very hungry, very cold, and a young SS soldier starts walking next to me. And he bends down and he says to me very quietly, he says, I'm going to give you something. It's going to help you. What he gave me was a little brown paper bag, and in it was sugar, powdered sugar. I couldn't even thank him. He was gone as quickly as he appeared. My 11-year-old mind seemed to know that I need to eat that sugar, so every few minutes I would wet my fingers and go in the sugar and lick my fingers. I don't know if that saved my life. It may well have, because that probably a pound of sugar gave me the energy to go on. I considered it a miracle under those circumstances, given the source of the gift. 2 days after this happened, we were loaded onto cattle cars yet again. Mind you, this is the end of January. It is snowing virtually every day. And now we are in open cattle cars. I don't know how it happened, but suddenly I found myself among men. What they did in Auschwitz, they lined up all the men, and then the men started walking, and then the women started walking. And somehow I found myself among the men. I was in a cattle car with all men. Whatever station we were at, they would lean over the edge and say, there is a child here, please give us food. In some stations, people would throw up a sandwich, not very often. After about a week, we ended up, the train stopped in Mauthausen, which also was a camp with gas chambers. But their gas chambers were not buildings, they were not rooms. The Mauthausen gas chambers were little buses on wheels. They would load the prisoners on those buses and gas them as they moved. I arrived in Mauthausen not knowing what awaited me. And they took me off the cattle car, and I was in a crowd of people. The first thing I saw was a veritable mountain of dead bodies. But I mean, in my memory, in my mind's eye, it was 10 feet high. Very, very shocking to me at that stage. As I'm walking in this crowd of men, a guard comes over to me, and he said, "Follow me and me alone." He took me to a barracks, which ended up being the brothel of Mauthausen camp. I was greeted by women dressed in loungewear, well-fed women. They welcomed me warmly. At age 11, I really did not know what that was all about. In a little way, they told me what was happening there, and it frightened me. I think I was prepared to die, but I was not prepared for what went on there. They showered me, they bathed me, they washed my hair because I was full of lice. By the way, we got to Auschwitz on November 3rd, and I had to wear clothing that was on the floor where we ended up in the crematorium, where they did not gas us. And I picked up the clothes. My mother just said, "Wear as many as you can." So I had those clothes from November 3rd until I arrived in Auschwitz at the end of January. Those clothes were never laundered. Those clothes were never changed. I lived and slept in those clothes. So I get to this brothel, and they take off all my clothes, and they shower me, and they scrub me, and they delice me, and they feed me. And I slept in a very comfortable bed. And on day 3, a guard comes and takes me to the doctor. Now I got really frightened because I kind of knew what awaited me. The doctor examined me very, very thoroughly. And I do speak German, and I begged him to have pity on me. I said, "Look at me, I'm skin and bones. What on earth have I got to offer?" I knew nothing about pedophilia, of course. But he sent me back to the brothel. And then the third miracle happened, because the next morning a guard came and took me to a bus, and there were other women on that bus, and we were taken away from Mauthausen to a subcamp called Lenzing, which was infinitely better. It was a work camp. We did sleep in a bombed-out factory with no windows, but it was such an enormous improvement over the death camps I had been to. On May 5th, in the morning, there was word going around that the Allies are coming close. And I had personally seen one of our SS guards, a woman, hide in the bushes and put on civilian clothes and leave her uniform in the bushes. So we were all in the courtyard, and at the top, we were at the foot of a very high hill, and at the top of the hill, there was a little Jeep that drove by and stopped, and 3 men in uniform came running down, a Frenchman, a Brit, and an American soldier, calling, yelling, "You're free, you're free." I was liberated by U.S. Third Army. And I was kept there for about a month. They tried to fatten us up. I weighed 52 pounds at liberation. I had a shaved head. I could not remember what my parents looked like. I tried so hard during that month, but I couldn't remember what they looked like. Never expected to see them again. A month into my liberation, they put me on a train with others from my hometown. We were taken back. They took us to a building where everybody had to sign in because so many thousands of families were looking for relatives. By the way, I had lost 34 aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins in the Holocaust. And I went upstairs to the first floor, and on the landing, I saw a man who looked familiar. And I walked up to him and I said, "My name is Eva Rosenbaum. Do you know me?" And it was a close friend of my father's. And he told me that my father had survived. And he took me to my father. And my father already had a letter from my mother that she survived as well. She was taken to a camp called Buchenwald when she left Auschwitz, and she worked in a munitions factory. She always joked that Hitler lost the war because she was making his munitions. I found my parents. I was then 12 years old. I turned 12 in February, and liberation was in May 5th. And in June of 1945, having found my family, I was whole again. My life was whole again. I have not in my day experienced what so many other Holocaust survivors experienced, that they had nightmares and they could not make a go of life. I had very positive thinking parents, very optimistic parents. And one day my father said, "God brought us out of hell. We were given life. Now make the best of it." And that's my story.